Pittsburgh Steelers fans, welcome to this week's episode of Steelers Sunday Q&A. I'm Matty Peverell, joined by Geoffrey Benedict. It's funny when you get into a flow on these shows, Geoffrey. I often try to mix up TDU with War Room, and it kind of feels weird to say Steelers Sunday when it's like almost lunchtime on Monday for me. But I'm really excited for this one with you. How are you going?
Going good, man. Doing great. Looking forward to this too.
Yeah, it's definitely been a full weekend for me of lots of Steelers and NFL draft podcasts and that sort of thing, whether I've been on them. I did a pre-record with another BTSC staff member this morning for their show, or it's listening to a lot of other things. I think it's, I haven't really got a chance to sort of catch up with you in the last couple of weeks around, free agency and heading into the draft. And I know you guys, have been really focusing on the curtain call around those draft picks and stuff like that. But if we start with free agency, and obviously this is a Q&A show, so for the live chat, throw up all your questions. Geoffrey, Benedict, and I am more this is what the show's here for, is very much an ask me anything sort of session, or ask us anything. But yeah, free agency, how are you feeling so far with everything? Where are the Steelers headed in your mind right now?
I like it. I love the moves they made, and it's weird, they made them so early. Right. So it feels like nothing's happening, and now we're at the point where there's a few holes left, or a few things we're looking for. And we're like, are you doing anything? Come on, Steelers. But they've done so much already this offseason. They've done so much already this free agency. I think most of the stuff they did was done by the time real free agency actually kicked off. They were the minute the legal tampering period hit, it was Steelers have signed 8 players. And then you're like it's not even really free agency yet. Which we saw with the Akello Witherspoon signing. Because that was announced forever ago. And then what was it, yesterday? They came out with a thing that was oh, he actually hasn't signed. And then the Steelers were like, no, okay, we are signing him.
Yeah.
You don't know. I love it. It's a very different offseason, and I'm still trying to catch up to all of the players that they've signed. I gotta get with Dave Schofield. We gotta figure out who we're gonna analyze this week on the Vertex, all that stuff. So I'm still catching up from that flurry of signing. So much film to watch, so many people to dive into, and this is a particularly busy season in my calendar. So it's been crazy.
Yeah, and I'll ask you the question that I asked Mark on Touchdown Under a couple of weeks ago, which is, wherever you had the Steelers from a win perspective, before free agency, right, where Mason Rudolph's the quarterback, and I know for a lot of people that's a 9 to 11 sort of scenario. Maybe it's only 7 to 9 scenario. Where are you feeling now? How many? Where do you feel that range of record looks like, and how many wins potentially has this added to this for your prediction?
Okay, so if we're going before the 2 offensive linemen signed, right?
Yep.
I would have had them pretty bad. Probably 7 to 8 wins.
Yep.
That kind of they're. Don't underestimate them. It's a Mike Tomlin team. They're going to find a way to scrap around and get to 500 and not have a losing record kind of a season. But with the additions they've made, we are a strong safety away, right? We have to get that strong safety. If they don't sign anybody, the whole defense is kind of in trouble because they're missing a starter. But considering they're going to sign a strong safety, right? That's a competent starter, a Terrell Edmonds level guy, at least. I think this is a team that pushes and competes for the division. That's really where I put it, is I think this is a team that can compete for the division.
Yeah.
And that's really the goal. Be in the mix for the division title, because if you win the division, you're in the playoffs.
Yeah, well, 100%. And that's it, right? And it's and I want to bring up Steeler Chick 46's question, because she's asked directly that about safety. It's kind of I don't know how many people watch the Premier League, but Jose Mourinho, who's quite a famous coach, has coached a lot of teams. He even had this, reputation for we're going to win all our home games, and then we'll just try and draw the rest. And then if we and as long as we don't lose, I'm just going to make sure we don't play to lose. And then that way, at the end of the Premier League season, we're going to finish up as champs. It's kind of a little bit like that now, in a way, with the 7th team in the playoffs, where if you just focus on your division and you prioritize those games, that's what's going to get you in. And so it's kind of, it's particularly tiebreakers, particularly now we've got 17 games. You're going to have probably 3 teams now. They're going to sit there between 10 and 13 wins in the North, right? And, you know, how that breaks down from the perspective of who's actually going to take the North versus who's got the tiebreakers, all the rest of it. It's going to be really interesting to see. But I wanted to bring up Steeler Chick 46's question, and I think Richard Adamson's asked a similar one in the live chat. So, you know, what do you want in an ideal world in terms of safety for the Steelers? Like, I think everyone's jumped on that Tyrann Mathieu hype train and all the rest of it, but, you know, we're a couple of days on, nothing's really happened there. You know, how are you feeling? Is just pick 20 interest you in some of the players that might be available then as well?
I don't want a rookie. The problem would be breaking in a rookie is the secondary of the Steelers is built around Minkah Fitzpatrick and what he does and putting him in the best position. And if you've got a rookie, you're going to be saying, Minkah, make sure this kid, you know, you're going to have to cover for this kid and make sure this kid is put in a situation where he can succeed. That's not a good place to have it. So I like a veteran. I see someone else asked, says, so nobody thinks the Steelers are going to give the safety position to Norwood. Norwood's a free safety. If you're moving Minkah around, you can play Norwood in deep zone, but he's not your strong safety. He's not coming down in the box. He's not that guy. He works great if you want a third safety. If you want a 3 safety formation, he can be a guy in deep zone. He's fantastic at deep zone coverage, but that's really limited, and you don't want to commit Minkah Fitzpatrick to being the strong safety, to being the guy in the box, to being the guy who's in man coverage. You want him in that zone role where he's free to attack, where he's moving and he's reading the quarterback and he's making plays. That's where you want Minkah Fitzpatrick. And I think that's really why I think the Steelers bring back a Terrell Edmunds or bring in a Tyrann Mathieu who plays safety like Terrell Edmunds, but, you know, also forces turnovers, also makes splash plays, where Terrell Edmunds has gone from the point where he would give up some big plays and not really create splash plays to he doesn't give up big plays and he doesn't create splash plays. You know, Tyrann Mathieu is the guy who doesn't give up big plays and create splash plays, but he plays the position very similar. He's just a better version of Terrell Edmunds, even though he's smaller. So I'd love to see those two. Those two make sense to me. Outside of that, if they bring in a different kind of player, we could see the Steelers secondary going in a different direction than they've gone. And so far, like there's so much up in the air with Brian Flores and Terrell Austin being separated from Keith Butler. You know, there's so many nuances and changes that can go on there. I'm really fascinated to see where the Steelers go with strong safety, just to see, you know, who do they want there? What type of a player do they want there? And what does that tell us about what they're going to do with the defense?
Yeah, 100%. I agree with you. And you want to allow Minkah to do Minkah things, right? You don't want him to have to be worrying about other things. And you heard Norwood talk about that, you know, in the sort of those end of season press conferences, how much, you know, Minkah was sort of supporting him and what have you. I guess so. In the topic of allowing Minkah to do Minkah things, you bring in a guy like Tyrann Mathieu. Now, there's obviously numerous pluses that he, you know, you saw the way he disrupted, you know, Patrick Mahomes in that Super Bowl a couple of years back. But do we risk moving Minkah away from being able to do the Minkah things, you know, by bringing in someone like a Tyrann Mathieu, like just because this guy brings a lot of attributes and, you know, possibilities and that word potential to this Steelers defense? Does it also disrupt too much? Is there too much change that potentially could be brought in, you know, if he comes in?
See, I would normally kind of be on that level where I'm like, okay, you know what, you can't bring in this guy because he's a playmaker and you already got a playmaker. You end up with 2 guys trying to do their own thing, and you know, one of them has to be the responsible guy. But the way the Steelers do it, if you watch Minkah Fitzpatrick and Edmunds, where like they almost play off each other pre-snap, and then Minkah has his responsibilities, and inside of that he's creative. Terrell Edmunds has inside his responsibilities, and inside of that he's not. He's not, you know, he's not creative. He's playing it by the book. And that's what he has to do. You know, he's not Minkah. He's not that guy. He's not Troy. He can't be that kind of creative player. But to me, I think Mathieu works. Honey Badger works because he could be that person in that role where you're like, okay, now you move down to the slot, right? In a certain setup, Minkah's now deep. You're in the slot. but you can create. You can, like Mike Hilton had the ability to blitz or not.
Yeah.
And there were plays you could tell Terrell Edmunds didn't know until Mike Hilton moved what was going on. Like Mike Hilton would be like, I'm going for a blitz, and he'd start to show it and then drop at the snap. And you see Terrell Edmunds start to pick that guy up and then have to like run deep, be like, oh no, I'm actually doing something completely different here because of what Hilton saw in the moment. Like you can, in our defense, we're kind of set up where you can give that kind of freedom to a second player like, Tyrann Mathieu, if he was there, and he's good enough that he can be in that role and still be responsible for his space. He's not going to completely abandon it. Minkah doesn't have the freedom Troy had, right? Nobody has the freedom Troy had to just do whatever. So for me, it could work. I think it would really work.
Yeah, and I think the game's also changed in a way where there are so many set roles in the way the Steelers' defense has evolved as well. But I don't want to get all comparing eras with each other. What about Kazee, though? Like, I mean, for me, I haven't seen a lot of his tape, so but I do kind of question the fit with Minkah. Like, I don't see it so much. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'd rather bring back Terrell.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I'm more a Terrell Edmunds than a Kazee guy. I think that's a better fit. But like there's kind of been a cold, wet blanket thrown on the Honey Badger acquisition thing with Colbert saying they want a guy who's as close to coming off his first contract as possible, whereas they're looking kind of being like, well, let's build for the future for a couple of years from now, whereas you bring in Tyrann Mathieu, that's right now. You're for right now if you're bringing him in.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I talked about, I don't want to spoil the surprise, but I talked about that with the person that I told you before we got on air, that like I was recording with another BTSC podcaster, featuring as a guest on their show for the next couple of days. And we were talking a little bit about that press conference and some of the things that, Mike Tomlin and Kevin Colbert were saying. And I think as fans, we read into every little sentence. Like, I think the question was asked about like, whether, they had done enough with whether Tua was like definitely coming back or not coming back. And they were talking about, where they want to draft someone at 20 and those sorts of things. And I was just sort of like, we read into every little detail. Like, just because they say they want veterans doesn't mean that they would skip out on someone like a Tyrann Mathieu as well. It might be the general philosophy, but there's always exceptions to the rule. So I think it's very funny. And we know that how cryptic they are, as well. And it's one where like, I work in the media in, my professional job. And I always find these press conferences fascinating because as someone that works on the media advisory side, I'm like, man, they stick to the script, the ability to be able to talk for 20 minutes and not really say anything at all, I think is really helpful. And obviously Tom, they know that as well. Like, they put it up there, because right now as we sit, they haven't signed Tyrann Mathieu. They may not sign Tyrann Mathieu, but if they go out there today in a press conference and say, yeah, we're looking for, proven performers of veterans. I mean, the Tyrann Mathieu mania that the live chats, some of the live chat brought up, just the hype train continues, right? And suddenly the price gets more expensive for Tyrann Mathieu. So who knows? Oh, that's right. We were talking about it with slot receiver and whether they felt they were comfortable with a slot receiver. And I just sort of said, well, they could say they're comfortable because they're talking to someone who's not signed their contract yet, like a Keller with the spoon, and then they haven't announced it. Like, we don't know what conversation they're having that we're not privy to, right? So I think it's a kind of a funny one. In the absence of a couple of questions, though, like, is there a position that you thought, let's say, a couple of months ago in the draft shouldn't have really or didn't really need to be a focus? Obviously, free agency changes things, but it didn't necessarily need to be a focus. But now you're like, hey, this is actually a top 3 need in this draft now that's particularly changed over the last couple of months.
Yeah, I was really, it was all inside linebacker, and offensive line. And you what's creeped up there now is like wide receiver.
100%.
Like, wide receivers absolutely creeped up in that conversation. And to me, the other one is still, I'm going to be on this all year until they pick up somebody, and that is defensive line. I want an interior defensive lineman early in the draft, but that's me. I think the only position that's really changed much is wide receiver. As we saw, James Washington and Juju Smith-Schuster, all of a sudden there's no, and Ray McLeod's gone. Even if James Washington and Juju Smith-Schuster left and the Steelers kept Ray McLeod, people would be like, all right, in a pinch, Ray's your number 3, right? If worse goes to worse, Ray's your number 3. That's, you could be worse. He played that role last season. Those were the 3 we used the most at the end of last season. So, you could think the Steelers would cap that, but now, like, who's number 3? There's nobody there. Nobody.
Yeah. It's like maybe Rico Bussey.
Yeah. And it's weird. I don't
Anthony
think
Miller.
as much as, I wrote an article saying they should bring in Jarvis Landry, make a push for him, which I know is not the most feasible. You'd have to overpay for a guy who's old. But honestly,
he's going to Green Bay.
I think probably something like that. But if you're not getting a veteran, you've got to bring somebody in.
Yeah.
But I want to ask you this one. That was this one. I don't see it in there. And I want to ask this to the live chat too. Who is the Steelers captain on offense this coming season?
Well, we talked about this in the Slack channel, I'd say at the end of the season. I personally think it's Najee Harris. I just do. I know, I could see why they might put in like a Trubisky because he is the quarterback, but I firmly believe it's Najee Harris. They asked him about it in the draft process. I think they asked that of everyone to see the leadership, but he acts like a veteran. I think the way that Ben bonded with him definitely shows it. I don't have an issue with it either when he's an older player. He comes from a school like Bama. He's going to be the focal point, regardless of whether it's Trubisky or there's a rookie in the next couple of seasons. So I have absolutely no issues with that, to be honest. I just don't.
Yeah, that's why I kind of would love to see a guy like a Jarvis Landry, because you could do 2 offensive captains, have Najee, have a guy like a Jarvis Landry, someone who is, light a fire under some people's rear ends. Because we haven't had that on offense for a while. We haven't had that player. And we lost Marquise Pouncey. We lost Ben Roethlisberger. Who are the leaders? Everyone deferred to Ben. Yeah. Everyone deferred to Ben Roethlisberger. And now he's gone.
And I think the other plus too is if we are at some stages Steelers are going to have a rookie quarterback, right? And one would hope that's during Najee's first 5 years of his deal, and then you probably franchise tag him, and then 6 years, and then he's got to be team friendly or he's out. But just giving a quarterback that captain role all the time. Of course, they lead the offense when they're on the field, but the reality of it too is they don't necessarily need that pressure. If you can avoid them having to do every single press conference, have to worry about everything under the sun, it's actually kind of a liberating thing. We see it in a lot of sports now where people hand back captaincy later on in their careers so they can just focus on doing well in a lot of other sports, right? And I sort of see that too. It's been brought up in the live chat. You talked about defensive linemen there. So you're sitting there at 20. Is there an ideal defensive lineman that you want the Steelers to draft?
Probably Davis. Because
you picked Davis? Okay.
Yeah, he's big, and he didn't play a ton of snaps. But you know what? On this defense, if you have Heyward and Alualu healthy, he doesn't have to play a ton of snaps.
What if you don't have Tuitt?
Yeah, if you don't have Tuitt, then you've got Wormley outside. You have Alualu inside, and you play Davis when they go to the 2-man fronts with the special package. You can put him in there and just be push the pocket back. You can have him in at nose tackle for a couple of snaps a game. You don't have to rely on him heavily, right? You're not looking for him to come in and be a starter. You're looking for him to come in and be an impact player in small doses, and that gives you a year to build him up, to get him in there to work. We did the Georgia talk. The guy was saying he has put up a lot of improvement. He's shown a lot of improvement over where he was even as a junior in the year before. In 2020 season to 2021 season, a lot of improvement. So this is a guy who's going to put in work, I think. And he would fit that. There's a couple other defensive linemen, but really I want someone who is a physical mauler that we can develop into a Cam Heyward, into a Stephon Tuitt, be one of those guys. I don't think Loudermilk is going to be Cameron Heyward. I don't think he's going to be Stephon Tuitt. Could he become kind of what Tyson Alualu has been? Yeah, I think he has that kind of potential, but that's not your anchor of your line. You need somebody for when Cam retires, or if Tuitt isn't that guy ever again,
Yeah, well, 100%. I'm a big fan of Devontae Wyatt. I questioned Davis in terms of being able to prove enough to play 3 downs. I know he didn't really get a chance, and Georgia had that. That defense is unreal. You actually go through the tape, it is absolutely unreal. Like there's just absolute guys on all of that. Question for you, because I've seen this name crop up and really start the hype train, and I personally don't think he's going to be there at 52. But if Boye Mafe was sitting there at 52, do you pick Boye Mafe at 52? Like, can you literally pass that up as like your third string outside linebacker? Because that guy is an athlete.
Yeah, that'd be a great fit, just because you saw what the Steelers did with Bud Dupree, right? And Bud Dupree, if he was the 52nd pick, people would have been a lot happier with him than with him being first round pick. And crazy thing was, he wasn't the reach. It was TJ Watt that everyone was like, oh, they drafted TJ Watt too early. He's not a first round outside linebacker. Bud Dupree, they're like, oh, that's a great pick, Pittsburgh. Yeah, but you could have that kind of athlete. And I think that's one of the things we're seeing with Alex Highsmith, is even though Alex Highsmith has a lot of polish and is a really good outside linebacker, he doesn't get to the ball fast enough to get sacks. Like you could leave him unblocked and TJ Watt could go through two people and get to the quarterback before Alex Highsmith gets there. That's the freakish athlete and talent of TJ Watt. Bud Dupree still got sacks. Why? Because if you moved away from TJ Watt, he could get there.
Yeah.
Whereas Alex Highsmith, he doesn't have that quickness. He's not that level of finisher. He doesn't have that athleticism. So that would be an ideal pickup, to have a guy like that who could develop, play rotational snaps, and then really, really step up in the future.
Yeah, because I've talked about this a little bit with Mark over the last few weeks, and the thing that is starting to concern me a little bit is the amount of snaps that we require Heyward and Watt to play, right? And particularly Watt, and you've got that contract. Like, yeah, it's 6 years or whatever it is left now. You want really TJ to have another minimum 8 years of like top performance, give him a second deal, pay him up big in that third, for 3 years at the end of the deal. You're not going to do that if he's playing this amount of snaps and having to play hurt. But if you lose him, suddenly the whole defense is questionable. And we know the offense is retooling and rebuilding, regardless of, if people don't want to use the word fine, but it is. That's the reality of it. And so that's the thing for me, is when we talk about defensive line early on, we talk about getting depth at outside linebacker. We haven't paid for it, in free agency. And, this guy like Akeem Hicks out there with, we're not going to pay for it. We've got to get it some way, or we're gambling at that point. Like, this is like when Shazier went down, we had no one there. Then you've got Bostic lining up on, and Vince Williams lining up on like Keenan Allen and getting burnt. Like, we want to be back there. And that's the thing for me. So yeah, I just think he's an interesting one, because his name is like absolutely skyrocketing. And as I said, like I doubt he's there past the 40th pick, but if he is, like, you go up there, you get him. I don't think you can question that pick. Or if like David Ajabo completely bottoms out now that he's gone, probably for the full season, like you sit there and you're like, do we pull, that sort of lever. But Steeler Chick 46 asked another really good question, because I keep thinking about how they'd intertwine, and I heard Cam talking about him on Move the Sticks with Daniel Jeremiah and Bucky Brooks, and they were talking about Connor Heyward and all the things he can do. You're one of the the key film guys for the Steelers. Could we fit him into what we do? Because he's a pretty versatile player.
Absolutely. People have said like, oh, we don't have a number 3 tight end. Well, there you go. Connor Heyward's your number 3 tight end, and they're like, he'd be a fullback. Well, yeah, he could be a fullback. He can be a wing back. He can be an H back. I've talked a lot in the past about Matt Canada's offense and how they use players creatively. We saw that with Zach Gentry. Most of Zach Gentry's receiving yards were off plays where he was a blocker who then was like, oh, I lost my block, turned around, caught a pass, and ran with it because no one was covering him, because he's not really a receiving threat, right? And you get 15, 20 yards off some of those, just bulldozing people. That's something you run for a Connor Heyward. But you could also line him up as an H-back and hand him the ball.
Yeah.
Or pitch him on those little shovel pass run plays, like Juju Smith-Schuster scored his first first touchdown of his career on. That was his first reception, was that short little pitch, boom, touchdown. He could do that. And as a blocker doing those kind of plays, like you can really mess with other teams. And he can run decent routes. He's not terrible. And he can get better, and I think you would see Derek Watt kept. You would see Connor Heyward there being the third tight end. and playing special teams, doing a little bit of everything. And then when Derek Watt season's over, Derek Watt's gone. And he's your fullback, number 3 tight end. He's still that guy. I think that would be a fantastic move. Love his film. Love what he does, man. I would love to have Connor Heyward.
Yeah, me too. And people are like, oh, I get him at the last pick of the 7th round. I think the Steelers have, is it like 213 or something like that? They need to pick him up there. I don't think he's sitting there at like to the 230 something, and they're picking the next one. Yeah. I don't think he's there at that point in time. But I don't have a problem with pulling the trigger on him, early in the 7th, even in the 6th, late in the 6th, trading back into the draft for him, with a late pick next year. Like I don't mind. If
the Steelers really like him and they would give him an actual role in the offense more than what Derek Watt gets, I'd take him as early as the 5th. But that's that's special teams ace category anyways. Anyway, and he's gonna be that. I mean, he's gonna be. If anyone remembers Cam Heyward when he was a rookie on special teams, man, that was. I mean, we could live with it. We could live with his brother playing special teams.
100%. That's it. So again, there's lots of great comments in the live chat. But in terms of questions sitting there right now, where do you see the Steelers focusing on tackle in the draft? Do you think they sit back and look for value in rounds 3 and 4? Now they've filled the interior line, re-signed Okorafor, you've got Dan Moore. If there's a top tackle like Steeler Nation 412 brings up like Trevor Penning, if he was sitting there at 20, do you go after him and get him? Then it's a question of best player available. I always think best player available is a little bit subject to your needs because that kind of frames it. I don't think it's very rare that a team literally through every round is going to pick the best player available. But how are you feeling about that tackle spot?
For me, I don't think tackle's a priority.
Yeah,
I don't think it is. Even with Zach Banner cut, I still don't think tackle is a pick you'd see high. I think that's like a situation like if a Dan Moore is there. Like I don't think the Steelers went out and said, you know what, we got to go get Dan Moore. I don't think that was the thing. Like that was just that got to that point and they're like, he's still around. He's the top guy on our list now. All right, let's go get him. You'd have to see a guy, and this is a thing to look for. If you're looking for a tackle, look for a guy with those measurables. Look for a big mauler with long arms. Really long arms. That's a big deal. They re-signed Chukwuma Okorafor. He's got long arms. This whole Myers' entire Pat Meyer, the offensive line coach's entire thing, tackles, long arms, because he wants them to go out and aggressively meet people. So you don't have to be the best footwork. You don't have to be the best pass blocker, but you're going to have to be long. You're going to have to be able to reach people and get to them. And you have to show a little bit of nastiness, which, there's some really nasty ones out there this year. But that's what you're looking for. And I don't think you're going to see it first round. I don't think you're going to see it second round. I think you're going to see third, fourth round. You can see one sneak in there. But, I mean, when we start on that route, the Steelers could take like 6 different players in the third and fourth round. I'm not saying they will take a tackle. I'm saying that's where you could see it slip in, is if it's there.
Yeah, and there's a guy that sticks out to me. I mean, he was my first war room of the 2021 season in Cordell Volson out of North Dakota State, right, and University. Like, obviously, and was the tackle there with Dylan Radnitz, who obviously got drafted there, and they were on that offensive line for Trey Lance, and he did a lot of testing because he had a very quiet year. They had a very quiet year this year. Obviously, when they don't have a quarterback that's getting NFL attention, North Dakota State, drops off the radar a little bit. But, he is someone that had done quite well. And then at the Combine, at the Senior Bowl, he played a lot. And I think he actually he might have gone to the Shrine Bowl. I can't remember. But he did a lot of reps at inside as well. And that was impressing a lot of people. So I think you look at someone that's versatile like that. If a guy like Ryman slips into the third, maybe the Steelers go, hey, this is too good to be true kind of thing and to go grab him. But also like in terms of the vet wide receiver, we were talking about a little bit earlier, and that's a question in the live chat from George. Do you think they go out and get one of the remaining wide receivers? Is there any names that sit there for you? In terms of who might be available? Obviously, we talked about Jarvis Landry. Like, do you go grab a T.Y. Hilton? Do you do a reunion with Emmanuel Sanders? Cole Beasley got cut. Guys like Sammy Watkins and Keenan Cole are available. I mean, I find Keenan Cole interests me potentially. He's got a little bit of height too. But yeah, any of those sorts of wide receivers stick out to you as potential alignment with the Steelers?
I mean, a guy like a T.Y. Hilton would work for what I think the Steelers could do this season. I'm looking, in my opinion, the Steelers should get a small, fast Z receiver, someone who's a legit deep threat. And I'd move people around. I think Chase Claypool is a better route runner than he is a deep threat. He showed that in college, and he's been that guy since. So for me, I like a veteran because I'm not sold on leadership, especially in the wide receiver room. I was okay with Juju Smith-Schuster being the leader of the room because that dude works hard. I'm not sold on Deontay Johnson and Chase Claypool. I don't like the way they talk in interviews. I don't like the answers they give. And, you see Deontay Johnson questioned about some of his stuff he needs to improve on. And it's like, I don't know if you're there. Julio would be fantastic. I don't know.
That's what I was going to, that was going to be my next question for you out of that list, because I mean, sure. Like, I heard a very interesting take of whether he's going to end up at the Colts, right? Like, if you're the Colts, you're asking Matt Ryan right now, like, do we bring him in at his age or do we not bring him in, right? But I think, him back in Pittsburgh, I know you love Larry Fitz. Do they bring him out of retirement?
Always. He could be 75 years old and I'd be for it. I'd be like, bring him back. You know what? Bring back Hines. Bring back Hines Ward. He doesn't even have to play. Just put him on the roster. Be like, Hines, you're our 7th wide receiver. We're going to have you inactive every week, but be on there on the sideline and rough.
You're a mentoring specialist. You run the M route. Classic. Before we wrap it up, I mean, I don't know about this, but I mean, let's say they pick a guy like, I mean, Penning's a right tackle up anyway, but like, let's say they go get it. There's a top tackle that falls to them, or they really like someone that we don't know about, or I mean, for me, if Evan Neal fell to 8, 9, or 10, I would not hate them going up and grabbing that man. But would you move more to swing? Like, would you do that if there was someone that had, let's say, more pedigree coming out of college?
I don't see it happening.
No, I mean,
I don't see it happening. I mean, I know Michael Beck would love it because, like, as he said, like, every position would be upgraded. And you're not wrong if you're looking at Dan Moore and saying we could do better. Yeah, Kendrick Green and Dan Moore, who was worse as a rookie? It's not that far apart. They're both they're not far apart. So for me, you could, but I don't think the Steelers will. I think that's why they brought in a Pat Meyer, was really an investment in Dan Moore Jr. being that left tackle. They saw something in him and they were like, we got to get a system where this guy can thrive and he's going to be that guy, right? He's going to be a great left tackle. That's what I think the idea behind a lot of what the Steelers are doing this offseason. That's part of it, is Dan Moore is your left tackle. How do you make that work, right? So I don't see that happening. I think they keep Dan Moore.
Yeah. Now, before we wrap it up, we've got a very interesting question from Steeler Chick 46. I want to have a little bit of fun with this. Is there any update on the Hines name? Will Hines sign and remain the Hines Field, sponsor? Will Hines remain the sponsors of the field? And Hines, through their parent company, have actually got quite a few monetary struggles. So I don't know whether they've got the money to do this. They signed a 20-year deal back in 2001 that was worth $57 million at $2.85 million per year. First, I'll ask you the serious question. Do you think it stays Heinz Field, or do you think it changes?
Well, I heard they were negotiating with what is it, Kraft, who now owns Heinz?
Yeah.
To try and keep it, because they kind of want to keep the name. It's a great name. When Heinz Field bought the names right, when Heinz bought the naming rights, we were like, everyone was thrilled because that's what you want here. That's a Pittsburgh legacy name. That's a fantastic company in the area. And then, if that goes away, what other company can fill that? So I think they're working towards that, and they're going to do everything they can to keep it. But it's going to be hard with the money involved to line that up.
So then I'm going to ask you the two fun questions. Fun question number one, if there was any other company brand in America that could sponsor that field other than Heinz, is there any that you would like to see it? And what name would you give the stadium? I mean,
obviously if US Steel did it, something like the steel company did it like that, like US Steel Field, that'd be great. I I don't know. I don't think there's any other companies really big enough that I would really want taking that field. But obviously we'll get used to whatever it is. I mean, some of the stadiums we have, like what's the Penguins like stadium is like First Energy, something like that. Like, there's a bunch of weird names out there for fields, and I mean PNC Park. Like there's a lot of different names, and people get used to it. Whatever it is, we'll adapt. We'll get used to it.
So then the funner question is, the more fun. Fun is terrible English. And then we'll get to the super chat and we'll close it out. So it's 2.85 million, right? AB's ego has no limits. If he offered you $3.5 million per year, $4 million per year, and wanted to call it, AB Field, if you're the Steelers, would you take it?
Business is booming field, sponsored by Antonio Brown. I'd do it. Booming Stadium, right there.
4 years, $4 million, $16 million.
Oh my gosh, I'd do it. I would. I'd be down.
It's hard to say no. It's hard to say no. And then you donate like half of that deal, to concussion. Like
someone said Iron City beer. I was like, that would work. I don't think they have the money for it, but Iron City, yeah, like that'd be great. Iron Field. I'm gonna say Iron Field.
All right. Well, Snowman, who likes to close out TDU with some super chats, he can close out this week's Steelers Q&A. Snowman, $5 in the tip jar. Thank you very much, mate. He says, who's one free agent you would like to see in a Steelers uniform not named the Honey Badger? Can't say Larry Fitz.
Gilmore's still unsigned, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Stephen Gilmore.
Yeah, nice. For me... it's Akeem Hicks, because we don't know what's happening with Tuitt. And even if he did,
sick.
I mean, like,
that'd be
come
sick.
on, man. The guy's like 348 pounds. Imagine like Tuitt, Heyward, Akeem Hicks. Like, good luck.
Right? It'd be ridiculous.
He's
a beast.
And I'd sign him to like 3 or 4 years and backload it too with like roster bonuses and just say like, because hey, you could make it like if that gets you another year with Heyward, if it keeps Tuitt fit, like the cap's going to go up. You've got like a Trubisky on a cheap deal. I mean, that just helps you, right? Like
plus it prevent him from lining up against Mason Cole, who he has absolutely obliterated throughout his career. Like our Mason Cole's probably our starting center, right? And he's done pretty well against everyone but Akeem Hicks. And he goes against Hicks and he gets absolutely destroyed every single time. So, that'd be nice if Hicks was on our team. We would never have to face that.
That's it. Well, that wraps up this week's Steelers Sunday Q&A. Geoffrey, anything you want to plug before we close it out?
My Tuesday podcast, I'm going to be recording it tomorrow. I've got like 12 hours from now, I'll be recording my podcast. It'll come out on Tuesday. But yeah, check out the Cutting Room Floor on Tuesday. I don't know what it's going to be about yet. I got to figure that out tonight. But that, and then the Vertex coming out this week that I also don't know what it's going to be about, but we'll figure it out. It'll be great. It's a good one. Whatever. I don't know what it's about, but it's a great one on a very, very good topic.
You sound like Mike Tomlin talking about who they're going to draft. Yeah. With that, Steelers fans, enjoy your Sunday evening, and we'll be seeing you on the BTSC podcast network.